Hello and welcome. I'm Bob Cusack, Editor-in-Chief of The Hill. Thank you for joining us for our program today, The Future of Defense, the Next Frontier for Military Flight. We would like to thank GE Aerospace for their support of today's event. Air power is a core component of our national defense ecosystem. As the United States assesses various geopolitical tensions, how might a modern air power technology increase competitiveness and propel the U.S. Air Force into the future of defense? Is the United States making the right investments to ensure readiness? Is the defense industrial base adequately prepared to meet modern defense needs? And what could the future hold for military flight? We will be putting these questions and more to our exciting lineup of speakers. But before we get underway, just a reminder that you can tweet us at the Hill Events using the hashtag #TheHillDefense. Here to set the stage for us as our first guest is a 25-year veteran of the U.S. Air Force who served in 3 combat operations. Please welcome John J.V. Venable, the Senior Research Fellow for Defense Policy at the Heritage Foundation. JV, thanks for joining us.
Bob, it's great to be with you.
Well, as I mentioned, you've got extensive experience as a pilot. Can you just describe how that experience has helped you as you've grappled with policy making in this area?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, Bob. First, thanks for having me with you this afternoon. This is a fascinating subject, and one of the things that I focused on throughout my 25 years was primary fighter and combat operations. What you're looking at right now across the spectrum of our developmental process here is a thought process that would leave the next 5 to 10 years under development and go to RDT&E hopeful dividends around the year 2030. What we're seeing right now in Ukraine is a couple of things. One is that hard power still rules. As much as we want to think it's not a combat attrition or combat casualty game, it certainly is. And the second side of this is that 4th generation airframes have no place any longer in the modern high threat fighter or combat environment. And that's just basically a common understanding that I think is missing from the dialogue today.
Where do you think that policymakers should make their investments, both for the short and the long term, especially with so many threats around the globe? You mentioned the Ukraine war. There's a lot going on now.
Yeah, Bob, the thing I would say right now is our policymakers, our leaders within the Air Force are focused on RDT&E, on science projects that will give us dividends sometime down the road. If you take a look at how costly these programs are, they're significant. The F-22 that we invested in for several years, that program cost right around $40 billion in modern day terms in order to give us what we thought was going to be 700 platforms. And we cut that buy down to something less than 200. The F-35 is that much more expensive. It's on the order of $66 billion in today's terms over the course of its time, and that's EMD development. What you get out of EMD, this engineering, manufacturing, and development process, is the ability to produce airframes. And we were supposed to be delivering, if you go back to 2014, we were supposed to be delivering on the order of 80 airframes a year, accepting it in the active duty Air Force. Right now, we're at 48. So this RDT&E premise is huge. So go one more area. Over the last 7 years, the Air Force has spent almost $300 billion on RDT&E programs. And the challenge out of that is squeezing something that the warfighter can use out of it today and in the near term and then in the long term. The AETP program is another one of those markers. This adaptive engine transition program appears to have delivered incredible benefits for the F-35 and the airframes down the road, but we have basically decided to scrap that program. That's $4 billion worth of scientific projects that we're just going to let go by the wayside. We need to focus on delivering things for the warfighter that begin to deliver now inside of the Davidson window and continue their development and the RDT&E process that's going to give us something in 10 to 15 years down the road. But we can't abdicate today for that future.
You mentioned this is budget season right now and investing, and then some things in the president's proposal have been embraced by Congress. Other programs, as you mentioned, have not were not in his budget. But at the same time, as you know, Congress has a big say in this, so they change what the president proposes. What do you think? Is 3% enough across the Air Force? A little bit higher for the Air Force compared to the overall Pentagon, but also about programs that Congress should put back into the budget that Biden did not put in.
Yeah, the Congress has been able to change the budgeting process around the margins. Over the years, we've gone from 48 to 60 F-35As, for example, and then back down to 48. We're supposed to go down to 33. We're up to 48. That kind of thought process, the Congress is able to budget to balance. On the other side of the coin, we're buying things that we can't use, and Congress is injecting those into the budget as well. The F-15EX is a fourth generation platform, no matter which way you look at it. The Air Force had intended to buy 0 of those, no more fourth generation fighters of any sort going back to 2017. And as I understand it, it was zeroed out of the last 2 years' budgets. And this year, there's 24 more F-15EX is being inserted. That's Congress's prerogative, but we need more of the viable platforms, Bob, and we need more funding overall in order to take our readiness accounts and our operational tempo up to a point where the modern day fighter pilot has the competencies required to go out and engage in combat and do it well. We're at an all-time low on the number of platforms that we have in the active duty service. We're at an all-time low of the number of flying hours and sorties that our pilots are getting right now. And we need to change that, and Congress needs to be invested in that. The last of these that I'll tell you is that along with more F-35s, they need to re-look at this adaptive engine technology program. The AETP program, Pratt & Whitney is going to deliver a gem when it comes out of their developmental process. And General Electric has already basically passed the thresholds that the government was looking for. We need to get both of those horses on the track, running side by side, and pick the best of them to meet the requirements, the cooling requirements, the thrust requirements, the power requirements, and then the range requirements that are going to be required of this system in a fight in the Pacific.
JV, can you talk about other countries, whether it's emerging technologies, engine technologies? Where do you see the threats as the biggest? And obviously that would be countries that are advancing their technologies, because we're not the only ones.
Yeah, China has got an incredible stealth program. We thought it was very well behind ours, but there's been some startling developments over the last 2 years, and pilots who have flown in that region have been surprised by what they've seen out of the stealth faculties of the Chinese. The Russians also have a program with that, but if you just look at what the Russians are able to do over the modern day environment, their SAM systems, the S-400 and the S-300, that is the older surface-to-air missile system that the Ukrainians are doing, they're both basically denying air power the ability to fly over the battlefield right now. And that's going to be something we face unless we've got fifth generation penetration capabilities, both with the bomber and with the fighter world. That's the first thing I would tell you. The second thing, from a friendly perspective, is that we've got lots of allies that are buying lots of fifth generation platforms. The Japanese, our ACC commander, Grace Kelly, has said that they're our #1 most powerful and potent ally in the region, but their stockpiles on air-to-air weaponry that would come off of the F-35, for example, those numbers are startlingly low, and the numbers of 2 to 3 total sorties worth for their fleet. And so the United States industrial complex is answering the call for almost the entire world with regard to air power and the things that come off of it, those jets. And we need to step up our game across the board.
I want to ask you about the import of the war in Ukraine, specifically for the future. There's a lot of debate in Congress among Republicans and Democrats, but how important is it for Ukraine to win that war just going forward, especially with, we've seen China and Russia this week. Their ties are getting closer. China obviously has escalating tensions with Taiwan. How important is winning that war?
Well, winning it gives us time. So the thing that the Ukrainians are doing in extraordinary measure is they're wading into the threat. They're taking their incredible morale and the weapons that we give them and going in and fighting the Russians and doing great work. What we're seeing on the Russian side is basically the standard rubblization that they've always fought with since World War II. They're not afraid of pushing their folks forward into that meat blender, if you will, and taking territory at the cost of large numbers of personnel. We need to continue to supply the Ukrainians with viable weapons platforms. The Patriot system is going to be great for them. HIMARS, GIMLRs, the entire apparatus of 155 millimeter artillery. But what we're finding right now, Bob, is that the West is running out of their stockpiles. To compound that problem, the Ukrainians have suffered significant casualties, and the numbers have been downplayed over time. And so this is a game that has a fuse on it. When I say game, it's a war that it needs to be turned over and won by the Ukrainians in rapid fashion, because we're finding right now we don't have the weaponry with which to give them. Our stockpiles are drained, and they're running out of qualified and trained personnel to move to the front. So this has got the window on this is the next 6 months is my guess, and that's going to make it one way or another.
J.B. Venable, thanks for joining us. Without a doubt, the stakes are very high.
Thank you, Bob.